Hi, I'm Bob,
And I'm Sherry.
and this is Mostly Politics with Bob and Sherry.
And today we're interviewing Joseph Patrick Murphy, who has been an immigration attorney in Allegheny County for the past 20 years. And he also ran for the county court common pleas judge in 2021, correct?
That's correct, and thanks for having me.
Let's talk about Title 42, Joe. Can you explain to our viewers what is Title 42 and what was designed to intend to do?
Well, Title 42, interestingly enough, is not even immigration law at all. Title 42, immigration law is Title 8. Title 42 of the United States Code is about public safety, and it gives the Surgeon General of the United States the power to designate or to suspend the what they call entries and imports from countries that the Surgeon General has decided could be a risk of importing with those imports and people infectious diseases. So it's almost a quarantine of a country or region, even products from that place. So Title 42, because
And when did Title 42?
well, it's been in the United States Code for quite a long time. These sorts of powers existed back into the Civil War. They were when people started moving around railroads and steam powered boats and things had been invented. You could move large quantities of people very quickly, and they recognized that sometimes large quantities of people would bring with them infectious diseases from wherever their point of origin was. So they started having these sort of laws that could say that region is infected, and we're going to suspend people and imports from that region because they could be bringing the water for food products from that region could be infected, and the people could be carrying the diseases that's running rampant. So they had that power for a long time. It was just never used this way. Frankly, it's pretty reasonable what President Trump did here. It's just I think there's a suspicion that it was used for unacceptable reasons. Okay, if you have a world pandemic going on and there's large countries to our south supplying lots and lots of people that are not vaccinated anywhere near the rate that we would like people to be vaccinated at, it might be perfectly reasonable to say, hold on a minute. I think the question was whether President Trump wasn't doing it for that reason, and he was misusing that, so to speak, quarantine power of Title 42 to prevent people he just didn't like. I think that was the fear, and a lot of the debate around Title 42 is about that, rather than. I don't think anyone here is saying, yeah, let's get as many diseased people in our country as possible. I don't think that's the case at all.
Are those valid legal claims to say the law exists and it's being used properly, but because of his intent,
No,
it's being misapplied?
no, and
Is
this
that
is
really a valid legal thing?
no, we're, right, because you're getting into, instead of constitutional analysis, you're getting into psychoanalysis, and that's not exactly what we're supposed to be doing with our court system. That's usually done on a couch by a guy stroking a beard. But yeah, so Title 42 isn't immigration law at all. Immigration law is Title 8, as I said. And normally people who are fleeing not so nice places can come to the borders of the United States and ask for asylum. They're allowed into the United States at that point, and they're given a year to present their asylum claim by filing an application for asylum. That's the normal process. And then the normal process, we would not turn away someone seeking asylum even if they were obviously infected with some terrible disease. When you do this humanitarian work, a lot of times the people are fleeing totalitarian regimes that manipulate their own socialized medical systems to keep their thumb on undesirables or keep the population docile and dependent. So in many cases, there's malnourishment that leads to all sorts of diseases, scurvies and things, bad teeth. So there is not a provision in asylum law for people to turn them away. That's called the anti-refoulement rule. We don't send them back. They have to be given a chance to speak to a judge. And that normally means that we're going to have to let them in the United States for a while waiting for a court hearing. That's the Title 8 approach. And the only people who are not allowed to do that are people that have already been deported, or primarily, or people that did horrible crimes in the United States that are inadmissible under any circumstances, even if they prove their claim. Otherwise, the anti-refoulement rules that we and many, many nations under UN treaty agreed to, we have to give them a break. And this is the same law that applies to someone who rows over from Cuba or climbs over the Berlin Wall. It's the law of asylum. So Title 8 would be inadequate if this disease was really that rampant and was killing. I mean, obviously, Corona was horrible and killed lots and lots of people. I think that the dire predictions at the beginning of Corona thankfully did not materialize. People were careful. They washed their hands. They wore masks, and they took vaccines. But is it appropriate to use it that way? Yeah, sure. It is absolutely appropriate to use it that way. Is it appropriate to use it that way even if you have meanness in your heart? The right thing for the wrong reasons, that's what you're getting at. One of the interesting things about a Title 42 expulsion is it's not a deportation. It's just an expulsion. So you got a lot of people who just keep trying it. If you get deported and you try and sneak back into the United States, that carries a jail term. So people that have been deported rarely try and sneak back in, or I shouldn't say rarely, but at a much lower rate than someone for whom there's no consequence, because they just get to keep trying. So that was one of the interesting things about the Title 42 expulsions. They could happen very quickly. There's no judge involved, no ability to claim asylum. But because you didn't have the deportation on your record, you weren't a repeat offender. So that was another neat consequence. I had some other neat notes here that I had made up. So 88% of the people that were expelled under Title 42 were single adults. 60% of them were from Mexico. They weren't from all these other countries. They were actually from Mexico itself. As I said, it's an expulsion, not a removal. Removal is the legal term for deportation. The law doesn't use, deportation is the consequence of a case seeking your removal. Let's see. Right now, under President Trump, 75% of border encounters led to Title 42 expulsion. That is to say, 75% of the people who they got their hands on got sent right back in a couple hours. Right now, it's about half. You've also seen a massive, massive increase in the number of people doing this. Okay, so this is just the people that are being caught, so to speak, caught. They call it migrant encounters. Border Patrol in April of 2020, the whole month, reported 10,000 encounters. Last month alone, there were over 200,000 encounters. So you have something like a 20-to-1 increase in the number of people doing this. And again, if you remove Title 42, you can expect that number to be multiplied 200 to 500% again. So, you had asked me earlier about my work with refugees, and I had some anecdotal thoughts on this just to give you an idea about how big this really is, because we're getting into the area of things that the citizens of the United States can't even comprehend. And I mean that with respect to everybody, but this is like jillion versus gazillion, they're kind of numbers, and it's hard to get your head around it. The border's collapsed. I work with African refugees at a little office in Charleroi, and a lot of different refugee and migrant groups show up in these communities. They're working in factories and things of this nature. And I have an immigration office there, and I help people. People come in, they want to get legal, they want to get their work permit, they want to register with the federal government, and they want to have a life. I'm thinking about January, we started seeing the first of the Haitian people from under the Del Rio Bridge showing up here in western Pennsylvania. And when they first showed up, most of them had been paroled into the United States. They did what I just explained. They'd asked for asylum. Somebody at Border Patrol said, great, let him in and go see a judge. And they would come to me to get the asylum claim going. Maybe get a work permit while they were waiting so they could make a few bucks. And originally they were coming. Some of them had been put on ankle monitoring for a while. We saw them with those. And as soon as they made claims and started filing and registering, they would take that stuff off them. After a couple of weeks, they were coming with little phones that the government could track and call them on and communicate. But these people all still had parole documents. They'd been identified, photographed, fingerprinted, even told to go to ICE offices and get a signature once a month. It's called parole. Now, obviously, these people aren't criminals, but it's similar process, right? We think of parole as being let out of jail, but this is a different type of parole. But it works in a lot of the same ways. They have to check in with law enforcement, and they have to kind of keep the government appraised of where they're living. By late February...
It's a tracking.
Well, it was a tracking. But by late July, I was having, instead of meeting these people one at a time, there were groups, 5, 10 people at a time would come in. They hadn't been given any papers at all. They were given a note that says, normally it says you've been paroled into the United States or you've been admitted to the United States, whatever status. It just says you've been arrested and released into the United States. There was no monitoring at all. They can't keep up with it. it's okay in a reasonable scale, but you need a lot of immigration lawyers to get all these people into the system. They're not all going to be able to do it. There's just not. Our immigration system here in the United States is very tiny. It's not designed for this gigantic, irregular immigration. We have, again, now for the second time in a couple years, parts of the immigration system have stopped taking calls, even from us. That is to say, if there's a problem, there's no one to call. During Corona was the only time I'd ever seen it. In the depths of Corona, they shut it down and you'd call the hotline and it would just hang up on you. Well, they announced yesterday that the National Visa Center, which coordinates the issuance of visas for people overseas, isn't going to take calls even from lawyers anymore, even if there's something wrong with the case. How does this work out? But it's not big enough. We need a much bigger immigration system to handle all the people that are coming in. We're not even admitting them.
The people that are being considered for asylum.
Sure.
So they come to. Do they always come to a border crossing, and then they interview, and the agents decide if they're a valid claim, or
Well, so there's a couple things that are
also sort of caught.
There are people that get caught inside the United States that actually get past Border Patrol and then get caught at some point later. And there are people who actually walk up to Border Patrol. Now, immigration law, international law recognizes that you might have to break the law of a country to get in there and claim asylum. Okay, you might have to jump over the Berlin Wall or something of this nature. So to a certain extent, a lot of that stuff's forgiven. But we shouldn't actually create a system where only people who break the law can get in here. So they created a system called parole, which we've talked about. You go up to Border Patrol, you say to the Border Patrol, I'm asking for asylum. And they go through a process. They do what's called a credible fear screening. Why? Right? You have to have a real reason. If your real reason is, well, I don't have a job in the other country, that's not a basis for asylum. My home country is poor, believe it or not, is not a basis for asylum. However, perhaps I'm gay and they don't really like that in the home country. They're going to arrest me. That might be one. Okay. So it has to be persecution. The home government has to be picking on you because of your race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. So the vast majority of these claims are economic in nature. These people, the claims are ultimately going to fail. But we still don't send people back. They still get a chance to try. So Border Patrol will parole them into the United States. That's not an admission. If you come with a visa, and you can be admitted, but many of these people don't have documents at all. Because they're paroled, they're subject to parole supervision, which we discussed before. To the best that the government can do it, we don't have enough agents, monitoring bracelets. There's just too many people. But the parole is normally for a year, and they have to. If it's just a regular parole, it's not someone who passes a credible fear screening, someone who hasn't already been deported or already been in the United States and overstayed or already been in the United States and maybe done a crime. It's someone who is reasonably subject to normal humanitarian parole. They're given a parole document, told to stop by ICE once in a while and check in and keep the government informed of their whereabouts. And during that year, it's expected that they will file an application for asylum. They have to do that on their own. The government doesn't pay for that or do it for them. So they have to either hire somebody like me or there's plenty of nonprofit and charitable organizations, Catholic Charities is pretty good. They'll help them do that. Once they file that, they have to be interviewed, again, this time by an asylum officer that is trained in this sort of stuff. The idea there is that the really, really strong and meritorious claims shouldn't tie up court time. These are easy to give to them. If somebody really has a really strong claim, great evidence, it's well documented in the news, fine. That doesn't need to see a judge. If the asylum officer can't give them asylum, then they're referred to immigration court, and that is actually a removal proceeding. Right? At that point, the government's seeking to deport them, but they're allowed to reassert their asylum claim as a defense to deportation. It's called a defensive asylum claim. Before immigration court, it's called an affirmative asylum claim. Some people are not allowed to use that process. That is because what they told the interviewing CBP officer didn't amount to a credible fear of persecution. They may have just said, I'm coming up here to get a job. Okay? They still won't throw those people out, even though they're ultimately going to fail. They'll still give them the year, but those people don't get to go through the interview. They have to go right to court because they're going to immediately start a removal against them because they didn't verbalize any real basis for asylum. Now, after a year sitting around the United States safe with some money in their pocket, and if they think about it a little more, they may realize, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, I know I wanted a job, but I also kind of didn't like getting beat up every Friday night by the local police chief or whatever was going on. They may think a little more clearly after a year. It feels so good when it stops, sort of thing. So you see that, but ultimately, those people don't. The people that can't verbalize a credible fear or can't wouldn't normally be allowed to get asylum anyway. Maybe they've already been deported, something like that. Those people, they don't get the affirmative process at all. They have to go. They go right into a deportation hearing, and they can assert their asylum as a defense. But the government takes the initiative at that point because now they're here, and what they're telling us the reason isn't one we accept.
Do you have any idea how many people are deported?
Oh, well, it depends. I mean, again, if you're going to count Title 42 expulsions, probably last month 100,000 that way alone. But actually deported, it's rarer than you'd think. Okay, Americans generally don't have the heart one-on-one to look someone in the eye and say you got to go. We don't like to cast people out. It's in our traditions. Being cast out is a pretty nasty thing in our ethnic DNA history of the United States. So people that really want to stay eventually will find a way for them, and it may not be through the grant of asylum. Maybe during that long process waiting for the asylum interviews and hearings, maybe they meet an American and get married. That solves the problem. Maybe they get a job and the employer wants to sponsor them. Solves the problem. Some of them actually decide to go home. I'm not fitting in there. It doesn't work. I never learned the language, and that society doesn't treat people like me very nice. I want to go. And people do that. Even if the people can't get given asylum, and even if they don't have enough to get a judge to give them asylum, there are other things and other types of relief from deportation that exist that aren't quite as good as asylum. Maybe there's no path to citizenship, but you don't have to go home. The people that get actually deported, thrown out, are people that during that time, instead of fitting in, didn't fit in. They started hurting Americans. They're selling drugs. They're doing things that we don't even let Americans do. So that those people there, and then the treatment would be quite harsh, and they get deported. I think I remember a statistic of something like 50,000 people at one point.
You were saying in April 2020, there was 20,000 people come through the border.
20,
And then
20.
now we have a 200 to 500% increase.
It's actually much bigger than that. So the statistic that I gave was April of 2020, about 10,000 encounters a month.
10,000, okay.
Last month there were over 200,000. So that's a 10-to-1 increase in 2 years. If you were to remove Title 42 expulsion as something that could be done, the number of people that would be let into the country of those 200,000 would be significantly more of them. I mean, maybe all of them. They'd all be very, very difficult. You'd have incredible amounts of immigration. If you think we're overrun as is, and I'm not kidding you, that border is overrun. They don't have anybody left to even watch the border. They've got so much paperwork to do. They've run out of monitoring bracelets. They've run out of the funny little phones. They don't even have time. They're just waving these people. They're taking these pictures, fingerprints, and photographs, and telling them to check back in with ICE later. Some of those people are found after the fact to be people it's illegal to let into the United States. Like, this one's already been here. Well, we let him go 3 weeks ago. This one's already been thrown out. This one was in here and killed an American, and they just let him loose into the country. Now, if and when these people go to their ICE check-ins, they don't just get a signature; they get arrested. But the people who've done these things know it. So yeah, it's very grim situation. And if you take away Title 42, the number of people that are going to be put into this country of that 200,000 is almost all of them. Right now, about half of them are being denied, and when President Trump was in office, probably 9 out of 10 of them were being denied under Title 42.
Why do you think the administration, understanding how flooded the border is, the current administration still fighting to lift Title 42, which that will allow more migrants to flood through the southern border and go into the interior of United States?
Because they find even the idea that this policy is motivated by racial concerns to be so outrageous that they'll do anything to avoid even that suspicion. They will burn this country down to just because they don't want to be called bad names.
It sounds to me like we have a lot of good faith processes and things in place, but it's just too many people. It's just overwhelmed, so we can't guarantee security or anything.
No, and you're guaranteed. And the problem is once that is known, which it is well known worldwide, all sorts of bad actors have been and will continue to use this. Criminals always use chaos as cover.
As an immigration attorney, do you find it frustrating with the current system?
No, I like what I do. I really enjoy people. I think you know that I'm a people person. I'm pretty good at a couple different languages, at least basic skills, and I have a lot of fun at what I do. I help people comply with our law. Most of the people that I run into are pleasant, fun, law abiding, and they want to fit in. But the criminals and terrorists that are using this mess as cover don't stop by the nice immigration office. So it's what I'm doing isn't disheartening. What I'm doing is actually, well, I mean, I make a few dollars. Immigration law was never exactly the the most glamorous part of lawyering, right? But I do enjoy an awful lot what I do, the humanitarian work I do. I find it very rewarding, and I really like the people. So no, I don't find it disheartening. It's also really neat to me to be able to explain how these processes work, because most people don't know. Most of the reporting is overly emotional, or people are talking about what they wish the law was, or there's all sorts of nonsense that goes on around this subject because there is so much emotion. But no, Sherry, I really like what I'm doing.
For the people and your clients, Allegheny County, what's their experience like? I mean, do they experience a lot of racism? Do people harass them? Do they have difficulty finding a job? I mean, do they have good experience?
Yeah, Allegheny County, although it's not exactly some sort of sanctuary county, but Allegheny County is and has been an immigration magnet for hundreds of years. Um, so we, as in our you Western Pennsylvania DNA, we tend to be immigrant friendly in our institutions and in our even in the workplaces. There are plenty of quiet little towns where even though you don't have it, nobody's asking a lot of questions about social security numbers or work permits. And Western Pennsylvania has opened up its arms, doors, jobs, and ultimately in hope that these people will use that money to get legal and do things the right way. But the way things went, yes, I think they've been treated quite well here in Western Pennsylvania. There's always a flyer of the story, but for the most part, they're treated quite well.
There is definitely an increase in fentanyl death and overdose. Do you think that's directly linked to the fact that the southern border is flooded?
Absolutely, absolutely, 100%. Again, bad actors are in this, and the bad actors are cartels. The bad actors are human traffickers on a massive scale. Uh, the bad actors, we've had recent encounters where actual terrorists were found in there. Terrorism watch list dignitaries were mixed in with this. And it's not just non state villains that are using this process, this weakness. It's not just non state villains. There are state organized enterprises. I believe North Korea is involved in some of this, and I believe the Chinese People's Republic is involved in this. And I believe they're helping the cartels get these sophisticated synthetic opioids. It's a moneymaker for them, and it strengthens them. It transfers wealth to the cartels. It transfers wealth to China, and it transfers death and weakness to us, their adversary.
Why do you think the United States government are not mobilizing our military to the southern border and really treat this as a war on drugs?
Well, because there's individual people coming across, and they're not enemy soldiers. They're people that are trying to get a buck. I mean, honestly, if they were paying $200 an hour to make cheeseburgers in Canada, I'd go up there. I wouldn't care about a work permit. I'd go up there and get some money. So most of them are not that, okay? And how do you sort that? And are you willing as a society to use military force to do that? Because the minute you do that, the minute we did anything vaguely like that, the geniuses, the cartels, the state actors would supply us with hundreds of thousands of mothers with crying infants in their arms, daring us to shoot them. It would be a public relations disaster. It could never be enforced. by military force. Military is only good against the military.
So tell us a little bit about your work with the African migrants and the Haitian migrants. You mentioned before the Haitian migrants we've seen on television back in January under the bridge now is in Pennsylvania.
Right.
How did they get here?
So again, the people, if you remember, there's a bridge in Del Rio, Texas, called the Del Rio International Bridge, and if you remember, about end of last summer or something, there was a highly publicized congregation of recent Haitian migrants under the Del Rio International Bridge. And there were so many of them at one point, they used the FAA and said you can't fly over this. They didn't want footage of how many people this was getting out. Ultimately, the vast majority of those people were paroled into the United States and told to either have a year to get to file asylum on their own through the affirmative process, or they were given court dates and put into the defensive process. Those people aren't required to stay in any particular place. They're allowed in the United States. So many of them will go to different places where there is support of one type or another. Okay, and that could be to the Haitian community, Little Haiti in New York City, where they've got an uncle or a long lost grandfather or something like that. It could be to some little town in God knows where they don't mind that you don't have your work permit yet. Any number of reasons that people might go to different places they heard of that are good ideas. Again, Western Pennsylvania is an immigration magnet. We have generations of immigrants think about their grandparents' experience and want to be good to somebody else's future grandparents, perhaps. So Western Pennsylvania is going to draw these people because we've got factories here that will give them jobs. We have plenty of factories here where they don't care that you don't have your work permit. They need workers. And this was going on, I might add, at a time when we couldn't get Americans off the couch. These immigrants didn't care about that disease, the masks, any of that stuff, the vaxes. They just wanted to work. And the American companies just wanted workers. So that worked out. And there was a draw. There's a draw here in Western Pennsylvania for our manufacturing base, which Americans, even before Corona, weren't really clamoring to get into.
Television has showed that our government was using taxpayers' dollars to transport these migrants to different parts of the United States. Is that true in your
It is, and
knowledge?
I've got even here. If you give me a minute, I want to walk and pick something up across the room. So I have this packet, and this is an example. I want to make sure I don't breach this person's privacy. But this is a packet that was given to one of them of documents to help them get around at night when we all stopped flying around the United States, and during Corona when nobody was supposed to be using it. They were sending these people, moving them all around the country with documents from Salvation Army, telling them how to get to different places. This is a packet they handed someone when they put them on an airplane, explaining how to file for asylum and the things we're talking about. There's even airline tickets in here, reservations at a hotel in some place in Moreno Valley, California, that they hand wrote for them how to get to the hotel they bought for them. And these are all social service organizations. I've had multiple reports of this, including from an airline employee who had not undergone the sensitivity training yet and said the words illegal alien at a gate in the middle of the night, moving illegal aliens around, and got fired for it. Yeah, tickets, reservations, all kind of stuff in this packet. I kept it because I thought it was so fascinating. Where things are, the maps of the United States. It's like and it really says, like, this person doesn't speak English, please help them. And there's armies of these people. They're being shipped all over the country. They've got to do it, because if they did all just congregate around the border, then you'd really know. And the Americans really would want blood, because it's crazy what's going on. It's very, very dangerous. I don't like to compare these things like people compare. They say invasion and infestation. They use all these kind of terms that are loaded and triggering and stuff like that. I don't know that I would use those sorts of words to describe this. They're still people, but it is quite dangerous, this policy, if only because of the criminal, both state and non-state criminal element, terrorism element, drug element that is absolutely mixed in with it on a massive scale.
What motivated you to get involved in this, and what kind of drives you on a regular basis?
Um, I can't say. I mean, this is work that I like doing. I like people. I don't necessarily turn my nose up at immigrants. I'm married to one. Um, I've lived myself in foreign countries for extended periods of time. I'm aware of how tough that can be. Um, I mean, I'm a Catholic. I guess that's part of our group thing. I can't say what really motivates me, other than being a voice of reason, doing a good job as a lawyer, and helping people get their green card.
Well, thank you. And this was very informative.
Well,
Um,
yeah, it's neat when you explain these things to people because there is so much confusion, there's so much noise, there's so much childish argument going on. It's a very orderly system. It makes perfectly good sense. And basically, all the controversy around Title 42 is because of the person who used it that way. It's a perfectly normal use of it. You've got a disease coming across your borders. That's what you do.
So it sounds like it's politics, you
Very,
know.
very
So
much so.
the way it was characterized, say the Democrats against Trump's doing it because he's racist.
He
So
may
now
have done
there's
it because he's racist, but that it doesn't. It's like
maybe.
if I pay my mortgage because I'm a racist, I'm still paying my mortgage, and it's still something I have to do. He's the president of the United States, right?
But then once you've been the one to label it that, now you're in charge, and if how can you then continue to use something that you've already branded
Right.
racist?
So it was an emergency power that Trump. I think. Well, again, I don't know. Like, I don't have ESP or crystal ball. I don't care why he did it. Particularly at the beginning of Corona, it was terrifying, and it made perfect sense.
Unfortunately, we lost Joseph. We had technical difficulties, and he's a busy man, so we didn't want to keep troubling him for a close. But we really appreciate him being here. It was very informative. Just a pleasure talking with him. And if you like Joseph and you want to see more of his videos, he's part of a YouTube channel called Allegheny Immigration Group is the name of the YouTube channel, and he has a website AlleghenyImmigration.com.
Once again, thank you so much. We know immigration is a hot topic right now in the country. We just wanted someone that's in the middle of it to come and explain it. Some of the legal ramification of it. But we are continue to bring you more topics that you're concerning about. And once again, thank you so much for watching.